In June 2017, the first Canadian Nelson Mandela Dialogues were held in Alberta on the Enoch Cree Nation, just west of Edmonton. 35 champions for justice and freedom gathered for the dialogue. Participants arrived from Australia, Cambodia, Croatia, Germany, Kenya, South Africa, Argentina, the United States, and Canada. The 2017 dialogues were hosted by Native Counseling Services of Alberta and the Enoch Cree Nation. Participants received a traditional welcome to Cree territory with a grand entry at the Enoch Powwow Grounds.
We wanted to really make a good impression that they were here in Treaty 6, they were here, and this was real.
They were welcomed by Grand Chief Willie Littlechild, CEO of Native Counseling Services of Alberta, Dr. Alan Benson, and the President of the Métis Nation of Alberta, Audrey Patra.
Ceremony was critical in creating the sacred space at the dialogues for participants. Every day we'd start with a smudge. We'd invite elders to come in and say a prayer. And then after that, we would do a hugging circle where every person had a chance to say good morning and hug. And the idea was to get this kind of heart-to-heart connection, to create that atmosphere of spiritual safety that we thought we needed to do this kind of work.
When it comes to smudging, it's like prayer. We all pray. It's the one thing that binds us all together as human beings. That traditional way, the way that was given to our nation to remind us how we need to live and how we need to go on living. Our walk is a difficult walk. Every day we need to prepare ourselves because we don't know what is going to take place this day. Your journey here means a lot to all of us here in this circle. So in your work over the next week, and your sharing, our prayers are with you.
On the second day of the dialogues, participants traveled to University No Haloti na Tausi Nistame Maganak.
So the organizing committee for the Nelson Mandela Dialogues knew that we needed to talk about the residential school legacy in Canada. We needed to set a very good context for these dialogues.
The most oppressive social policies were focused on assimilation and the eradication of the Indigenous identity. For 176 years, Indigenous children were taken from their families and communities and forced to attend residential school. The last school closed in Canada in 1996.
I was 10 when I went to Blue Quill's Indian residential school, as it was known then, and I stayed there till I was 14.
The goal of residential school policy was threefold. 1, separate children from family, language, culture, and spirituality. 2, socialize them into European values and lifestyle. And 3, assimilation through enfranchisement.
It was basically to take the Indian out of the child. It was important for us to take the participants there because to actually see the residential school, you can talk about it, but to actually be there, there were survivors that were heading up to tours. I hope they got an understanding of what life was like there and the impact that it's had on our people.
Being able to hear people's accountings of what that has cost them in their lives has been a pretty astounding revelation to me.
After the tour, the participants gathered in a circle for the first time. In many First Nations cultures, the circle process is often used to make important decisions and share information or teachings.
In a circle, you can't hide. It's hard to hide. There's no corners you can hide in. There's usually some kind of item, like a feather or a rock, that is passed around, and they're the only one that are allowed to talk. Everyone else can't interrupt. They have to wait till they're holding the item. It's a good, equal way of doing things.
Participants in the Nelson Mandela dialogues are all from nations that have experienced government dictatorships, apartheid, colonization, and oppressive regimes. The primary instruments of oppression is control over public systems, including land ownership, education, media, justice, child welfare, and prison. In all countries, these systems are complex power structures built upon law, policies, institutions, and programs. Every participant is a leader, someone who has reflected on the current state of their own country's systems and institutions. All are individuals dedicated to advancing human rights from inside the system or protesting the system. They are united in the desire to create better, more just societies. On day 3, participants were asked to reflect upon the way in which change can be achieved, how we create sacred space for innovation, meaningful participation, and the transformation of systems.
We did not want people to be comfortable in that space. We wanted to create a space that would push people to think differently. The way to keep people safe and yet uncomfortable is to have very strict rules of the way circle process works.
Participants formed small groups. They shared their perspective and experience of working for systemic change both within and outside of government.
We started talking about what is the nature of sacred space? What does it look like? And how do we create sacred space? And it was a very interesting day. There were some participants who thought the word sacred wasn't appropriate, that it was too dogmatic or religious. Other people were not really following circle process. There was some transgression of those boundaries. As a result, some of the circles maybe fell apart a little bit. And there were also people who felt that they couldn't understand how the dialogue process would produce outcomes that could be maybe reported in a final report.
We all need to have difficult conversations, and that's okay. Those are the growing pains of freedom and liberation.
We had leaders in that group, and we had people who were very used to fighting the good fight. You know, people who are making systemic changes from the inside as bureaucrats or people in the system, or protesting and fighting on the outside. And we needed to come together as one group. And at the very beginning, that was tough. You know, people were still in their own zone, in their own space. And maybe we were still kind of fighting a little bit. So in hindsight, I think as a facilitator, we were right where we needed to be at that time. We were working it out as a group.
Some nations have investigated issues of oppression through public inquiries, including Truth and Reconciliation Commissions. Community engagement with the participants was an important part of the dialogue process. Shirley Gunn spoke about standing against oppression in South Africa at the Edmonton Public Library.
The South African Truth Commission was a great movement that brought us to this historic juncture, not only by our great leader Nelson Mandela, but by thousands of people who bear the scars of apartheid today still. So our Truth Commission was a quick fix. The problem was that the whole balance of the Truth Commission was that it would look at the harms done during apartheid, but it would also invite perpetrators to come forward and tell the whole truth to the nation. And if they did so, they would get amnesty. What? A carrot on the stick. But many of the generals, many of the police, politicians, jurists, magistrates, they were shredding documents in the backyards. They were getting rid of evidence. The kind of system and oppression in South Africa, racial capitalism, had damaged the entire society. There was healing needed not only on the side of the survivors, but also on the side of the perpetrators. And that was the basis of the community reparations package, which to this day has not been implemented. Truth, justice, reparations, possibly we could arrive at reconciliation.
In Canada, we have had the Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples in 1996. Most recently, we've had the Truth and Reconciliation Commission that had a final report in 2015, and from that came 94 calls to action. There have been Truth and Reconciliation Commissions around the globe. There have been so many recommendations, but really so little change.
On the fourth day, the dialogue intensified.
The goal of day 4 was to actually create the sacred space that we had been talking about. And the very first thing we did in the morning is we asked participants, is there anyone here who has felt unsafe in the work that they did? And 6 participants came forward. And then we asked all of the rest of the participants to form the outside circle. And the instructions that we gave were for the inner circle, we wanted them to follow circle process and talk about the painful experiences that they had had in their work. And the instructions to the outer circle was to surround that inner circle with loving, supportive kindness.
That circle was the most powerful moment to me. As a listener, it was from the very deepest experiences they had. It's like we didn't breathe. We were just holding that space. We were holding the energy and almost like a protective circle around them. We were deeply moved, but we were also deeply united.
We think in South Africa we are the only ones who are faced with difficulties, that we have a difficult past. But in that space, I realized that we were not alone. People began to speak about a whole range of issues. In fact, there was a guy who was part of the dialogues from the very beginning. And I've never heard him speaking so honestly and openly, because he was feeling very safe in that space.
There is this superficial element that you can easily engage with and recognise. But the more you think and the more you take to heart and mind the deeper messages, that for me becomes a very sacred space, because that is where it is a transformation. It is a set of awakenings that can serve the greater good.
On day 5, the group was invited to attend a sweat lodge, a Cree purification ceremony that is offered for prayer and healing. Participants were asked to reflect on their personal journey and how they can be leaders of change.
Well, a lot of them had never been in a sweat before. It was an opportunity for us to share our way of healing and knowing. For some of them, they had been feeling all kinds of up and down feelings throughout the days previous, and it was a good place to come together and just be invited to feel as one with the group and with the creators and with the grandfathers and grandmothers.
Personally, it's also been a chance to reflect on my work and how I am situated in my work and who I am outside of my work. These are huge issues. It's very easy to be a professional, and it's sometimes more of a risk to be human.
On the last day of the dialogues, the participants gathered for one final time. They were offered an opportunity to pick and braid sweetgrass, a sacred Cree medicine.
One blade of grass can be broken easily, but when we braid the grasses together, that is very, very strong. And so if you take that concept and think about that with people, you can have strength in numbers and strength to support one another.
What I experienced here was an overwhelming desire and inner strength to move forward. And I'm hoping that I can actually take that strength back to Australia and to the nations that I encounter throughout my work.
So the dialogues, they centered the importance of talking, that we can solve problems by talking to each other. Because most of the problems that we have in the world today are because people don't understand each other and they don't talk to each other.
I've come away an utterly changed person. I've been through experiences I won't be able to forget. I feel it's incumbent upon me to disseminate ideas that I feel might contribute to that process of reconciliation.
My role is to amplify those stories, to get those stories out that will create greater sensitivity, more awareness, will humanize an issue that doesn't always have a face.
I always have hope. I also have profound and an immense love for this land. These dialogues are a privilege. It's an honor to be here. It is.
It was really well done, and I think that the process that we used was positive. I believe that we did receive the help that we needed from the ones unknown and unseen to come and help what it is that we have to teach, and we have a lot of good things to teach the world.
Nelson Mandela is a global icon of reconciliation, and taking these dialogues forward in his name, it kind of deepens the work that Nelson Mandela was doing. Because we must remember, when Nelson Mandela retired, he made a statement and he said, "It's in your hands," which means whatever Nelson Mandela had done, a new generation will have to take over and continue with it. And I think the dialogues are a right step in that direction.